Hey Navigators, today I am in Celebration, Florida. One of the coolest, strangest little towns. I mean, isn't that cool? The architecture. But is it too cool? Let's take a ride and find out.
Today we're in Osceola County, near Disney World, in what could be called, well, not a magic kingdom, but a magic small town called Celebration. It's like stepping into another world of days long past. Some call it charming, others call it creepy. You'll have to decide for yourself.
So this is actually my second ride today. We're heading to Celebration from Winter Garden. I always try to have two locations on a ride if possible, because you have to take advantage of when the weather is really good. And today is gorgeous. It's in the fall, but it's just so great. It's so rare that we get really nice, like air-conditioned weather outside. So you really, if it's there, man, you got to use it. And the way I use it is I hit the road and do Navi-Gator episodes. So sit back and enjoy.
Hey Navigators, welcome to the channel. Here today we are riding into Celebration, Florida. Now this town is so cool, and this is the outskirts. These are buildings that are like rented out for businesses or apartments and whatnot. And you'll see on the side here that they added some architectural detail to kind of hint back at like a futuristic Art Deco sort of experience. And you'll notice this on a lot of the bigger buildings that are for businesses before you get into the main part of town, which kind of harkens back to a nostalgic small town charm. But each of these buildings has a little flair to it that makes it a little different and is obviously designed with older styles than newer ones. And I gotta tell you, I miss that in architecture. I look at buildings today and they're so boring. And I'm like, it doesn't cost any more, really, substantially more, to create a building that's interesting, that reminds us of old, tried and true architectural designs. It drives me nuts that everything is so practical and yet uninspired. Where with Celebration, they try to make even the business buildings have a little nostalgic flair. Well, since this little town is so unique, where did it come from? Well, back when Walt Disney was planning Disney World in Florida, he had a great vision called EPCOT, the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. And that's not the theme park you see today. He originally imagined a real city, 20,000 people living beneath a giant dome zipping between skyscrapers on monorails. It was supposed to be a utopian city where there would be no slums or unemployment or not even home ownership. Everything would be rented from Disney. It would be populated by the smartest leaders from all the major industries. It was Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley. It was bold and visionary, and after Walt's death in 1966, it never happened. Not the way he envisioned it. So if we fast forward to around 1985, Disney executives dusted off Walt's dream, except this time with a twist. Where Walt looked to the future, they looked to the past. They studied historic neighborhoods in New Orleans, Savannah, and Charleston, trying to capture what made America's best small towns special. Now, in the early 1990s, Disney established the Celebration Company to develop about 4,900 acres of land. The total investment eventually reached $4 billion. Back then, the CEO was Michael Eisner, and he encouraged his team to quote-unquote make history and develop a town worthy of the Disney brand. So they assembled an all-star team of architects. Philip Johnson designed the Welcome Center. Michael Graves took the post office. Cesar Pelli got the movie theater, and that's to name just a few. When finished, critics called Celebration the most impressive collection of postmodern architecture in the world. The town was designed around an approach called New Urbanism, a planning movement that rejected the suburban sprawl. So unlike typical suburbs, Celebration's homes were grouped close together and set close to the street, just like a century ago. Garages were hidden behind houses along alleyways. They didn't want any cars parked on the streets originally. Streets had shade trees and wide sidewalks, and everything was walkable. Houses came in just 6 different models, painted white, yellow, pink, tan, or blue, with wide porches and spacious yards. And about half the land was designated as nature conservation, with over 23 miles of trails connecting the neighborhoods. In 1995, Disney held a lottery to decide which families could buy first. The demand was overwhelming because Disney's marketing was brilliant and unabashedly nostalgic. Here's their pitch. And imagine this in that Disney voiceover back in the day. Their pitch was, there was once a place where neighbors greeted neighbors in the quiet of summer twilight, where children chased fireflies and porch swings provided easy refuge from the cares of the day. The movie house showed cartoons on Saturday. Remember that place? That was genius marketing because it was aimed at baby boomers who grew up watching Disney on Sunday nights. So for them, Disney was not just selling homes, but an alternative life. Now, the first family moved in June 8th, 1996. And when residents arrived, they found picture-perfect homes with white picket fences, immaculate streetscapes, and impressive amenities. Now, I saw this firsthand. My wife and I walked through this town with some friends of ours soon after the homes were sold. And I got to tell you, when I first visited it, it was a really enticing place. Impressive in that nostalgic way, like they were selling. It was like a town you saw in the movies that you always wanted to live in. You know what I mean? So Celebration had a state-of-the-art hospital focused on wellness, schools designed by experts from Harvard and Johns Hopkins, a library, shops, restaurants, and even the famous Columbia restaurant from Tampa, which we showed in our Ybor City episode, has a small restaurant here. And then Disney did things that are uniquely Disney. Muzak played from speakers hidden in palm trees. Other trees had speakers playing bird song. In winter, fake snow adorned rooftops. The town hosted events where soap flakes fell like snow in the town center. Residents called their town the Bubble because it felt like they were living in a separate universe. It was a town of pretty buildings and neat streets and smiling people and no litter anywhere. It was like living at Disney. You know what time it is? It's time to feed Algo the alligator. As you know, no person is watching these videos to decide on YouTube whether it should be shown to others. That's done by computers and algorithms. And the way they know that people enjoy this is by how long people watch, or clicking buttons, or writing things. And the latest challenge for a show like this is that there is now so much AI content, they call it AI slop, that it's really hard to rise above the noise. So if you want to support a channel with real places, like Celebration, written by a real person, me, who personally researches the town and all of its history, well, just do me a favor and push buttons or write things or subscribe or whatever you want to do. You don't have to, but by doing so, you'll let the algorithm know that people who enjoy motorcycles or small towns or histories or anything like that, that this channel and this town is worth the view. So anything you could do, I would greatly appreciate it. Within months, flaws began to surface. First, the rules. Residents could only use certain colors of curtains. Lawns had to be kept at a specific height. There was even a rule that every house had to have a Mickey Mouse hidden somewhere on the property. For some outsiders, Celebration was creepy. And yeah, riding through it, as you'll see, it can kind of maybe have that vibe. Then the school became a disaster. Instead of traditional classrooms with 25 or 30 students, Celebration classes had up to 80 kids from various grades with 3 teachers. Parents called it a waste of time and complained about serious academic shortcomings. Teachers prepared incredibly detailed report cards with heated criticism of each child. The principal quit in the first year, followed by a quarter of the staff. Some families even sold their homes and left. So I guess all those academics at Harvard and Johns Hopkins missed the mark on that one. And for all of its plans to be idyllic, even Celebration has some dark histories. Between 1998 and 2010, an armed home invasion occurred. There was a murder of an alleged sex offender. There was a 14-hour standoff from a resident that ended in them, unliving themselves. And then there was a story of 3 men vacationing who disappeared, only to be found dead, having apparently driven into a nearby lake accidentally and drowning. Now, in 2004, Disney began stepping back. They sold the downtown area to private investors. And I will say that when my wife and I were walking through this town back in '98, the houses looked really cool, because it is like Charleston, Savannah, and New Orleans. And we had been to all those towns, so it was really, really enticing. But I will admit, having grown up in Florida, that some of the construction, it looked rushed, It's hard to say, or it's really hard to show on these cameras, but I'm not saying that it's like that now, but even back then it was, it's just curious. And unfortunately that ended up being true for some people. The consequences of early construction problems became impossible to ignore, and by 2016, condominium owners, for example, were battling leaky roofs and balconies that separated from the buildings. Some had mold. So there was a lawsuit for $15 to $20 million for deferred repairs. All right, here are some stats for you. Now, these are a little difficult to get because Celebration is actually a subset of Kissimmee. So finding exact data was a little difficult, but this is the best I could get. Celebration is about 11 square miles and a total population of about 13,000 people. There are about 5,000 residences, and median home value is about $613,000. And the average rent is about $2,600. As far as demographics go, 70% are white, 20% are Hispanic, 4% are Asian, 2% are black, and 4% are multiracial. As far as age goes, there was not a lot of detail, just kind of wide swaths. So I can tell you that 25 to 33% in there somewhere are under 20. 60% are between 21 and 64. That's a very large grouping. And 10% are over 65. So it's not a retirement community. The per capita income is about $57,000, which is higher than the U.S. average of $43,000. And the median household income is about $97,000, and that is also above the U.S. average of $79,000. And that is all I could find out. So I hope that scratches your statistic itch. So a town like Celebration, that isn't just a planned community, but like an uber planned community. It almost seems too planned. It's why it gave some people like the creeps in a Stepford Wives sort of way. All that over planning kind of takes away from authenticity. You know, it's like this isn't an organic town, and this isn't just a planned town. This is a uber planned town. And when it goes that extra mile, for some people, it actually loses some of its charm. It's really hard to explain. So the question that a lot of people had was Disney selling nostalgia or selling amnesia for people to get out of their own existence? But the good part is this little town, which has certainly grown since the first time I was here, has pushed the boundaries in urban planning and attracted world-class architects. And it proved, which I'm very grateful for, that people still hungered for walkable streets and community connection, which I think is 100% true. So Celebration is not a perfect Disney town, but is something actually that's more interesting. It's a real place that's really cool, but it has real problems, because housed in those homes are flawed real people. Now, as I rode through these streets, I got to tell you, now I'm going to say something that will sound like it shouldn't make any sense, and it may not make sense to you from your viewpoint taking this virtual ride on the back of my motorcycle. But as I rode through all these neighborhoods, they were all awesome. But the problem was they were all awesome. And I don't know how to explain this. So in the Winter Garden episode, I stumbled upon that amazing neighborhood with homes a lot like in Celebration, actually, but it looked real. It looked organized, but not over-planned. There was a lot of variations in design, and they were all kind of amazing, similar to Celebration, but it felt more like a real community that grew up because as Winter Garden grew up, as Florida got more populated, home builders realized that there was this desire for homes that resemble maybe the types that people grew up in the north or north of us here in the South Carolina or Georgia, and use that inspiration to build that real neighborhood where Celebration is planned to do all of that as well. But when every neighborhood is awesome, then awesome loses some of its value, because it becomes redundant. It doesn't feel organic. You never stumble upon a non-awesome neighborhood. And again, this sounds so stupid, but, and maybe it's not even a real criticism, but I just found myself turning the corner and going down another road and going, oh, this is a cool neighborhood, and all these homes are amazing, but they are just like the other homes that were amazing. Maybe different sizes or different architectural approach, but there's just not a lot of variation in amazing. And that shouldn't sound like a criticism, but in an odd way, too much awesome becomes less awesome. And you can quote me on that. So I have not been back to Celebration since I first saw it back in the 90s when it first opened. And I will say it is a lot larger than it was back then. Not in a bad way, but I'm really surprised at how many homes there are here. One of the downsides of riding these rides on a Saturday is that some of the coolest places visually to see are the main thoroughfares on the main streets. And they're normally blocked off for events on Saturday mornings. So I kind of try to give you a peek of what may be down there, but I really wish I could give you a ride through it. But unfortunately, I can't. But that's one of the downsides. Another interesting aspect to Celebration in comparison to other little towns is that it's also a kind of tourist destination. So there's a lot of people that are driving around these streets, like me, who don't live here. And so the streets can be a little crowded, or the traffic can be a little heavier, or as I saw a lot on my ride, parking can be a challenge in some of the main areas, just simply because many people who don't live here come by and want to check it out, like we are today. So the new urbanism approach to architecture actually started in another Florida town, which I plan on trying to ride through next year. It's a little farther drive, so I have to plan accordingly. But I believe it's the town where the Truman Show was shot. So I'm going to be really interested when I ride through that town to compare it to Celebration and Winter Garden's really awesome neighborhood, because that city, I think it's called Seaside, I'm not really sure, but that city was built just to be a town. It just decided to take a unique approach to architecture at the time, and that has been copied ever since. So I can't wait to ride through that town this year, so we can contrast and compare as we used to do in high school back in the day. I just got done with the ride in Celebration, and I had some technical challenges. I have to talk to GoPro about this, because apparently there's no warning when you keep your lens cap on. Like, how am I supposed to remember everything? Yeah. So there was a good 15 minutes of riding that is just a black screen. So then I had to redo those routes. I hope I got everything. My little, camera for the handlebars, I had to switch out every once in a while, and I don't know. I'm gonna put it, hopefully what you've just watched was awesome. But I do understand why Celebration feels kind of creepy in a little way, because it is too planned, and all the neighborhoods are awesome, but in the same way. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, you saw the video, or at least the video I was able to capture and keep. It's kind of reminded me of the Villages a little bit. So anyway, I love the ride though. It's October, it's nearing Halloween, so you see all the decorations out. There's always events going on Saturday mornings and in the main squares, so I can never get to ride through those areas. But it was a cool ride. It's a really beautiful place. But I understand why people think it's a little odd. I get it now. All right, as always, thank you for spending some time with me today. Well, I hope you have enjoyed your time with me today. Celebration, cool little town, right? So for you, is it neat or does it feel a little creepy? Is it appropriately designed or overplanned? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you because it is a very, very different place to live. But as always, I am so grateful that you spent your time with me today. As you know, I believe time is the most precious treasure that we have. And the fact that you spent any of that with me means the world to me. I mean that sincerely. So remember, when you're on the road, please be safe, be kind, be generous to those around you, and most of all, have fun. All right, I'll see you guys next time.